When I was in grade 10, an event occurred that completely transformed my perspective on school. A new English teacher, Mr. Scott, joined us, and the moment he entered the classroom, it felt as though a surge of energy had taken over the room. We had heard whispers about him before he even arrived, but none of us could have anticipated the impact he would have. Mr. Scott was unlike any teacher we'd encountered. At just 24 years old, he carried an air of maturity and quiet confidence that made him seem much older. He was tall and had a noticeable yet understated presence. His thick, dark hair, always neatly combed back, seemed to shine under the classroom's harsh fluorescent lights, and his warm brown eyes had an uncanny ability to make you feel seen, as if he could understand exactly what you needed without a word. What truly set him apart wasn't his appearance but the way he made everyone feel valued. His magnetic personality drew people in effortlessly. The girls at school were especially charmed by him. Every break, clusters of them would linger near his classroom, hoping for a chance to see him or exchange a quick hello. It was easy to spot them, giggling, whispering, and stealing glances toward his door. Some even pretended to have errands nearby, but their intentions were no secret. And Mr. Scott? He never seemed fazed by the attention. He always greeted them with a kind smile that made each person feel special, even if they were just a face in the crowd. Despite the admiration, he remained grounded. While other young teachers might have let the flattery get to them, Mr. Scott maintained his professionalism. His focus never wavered. He was there to teach, and he did so with unmatched passion and energy. His charm wasn't just skin deep. He had a gift for making literature come alive in ways we had never imagined. Shakespeare wasn't just an old playwright anymore. It became a thrilling journey. Each lesson felt like an adventure, and I found myself captivated, eagerly hanging on to his every word. For the first time, English became my favorite subject, not just because of the material but because of how Mr. Scott inspired me. He made me want to push myself, strive for more, and be the best version of myself. I found myself drawn to him, not only for his undeniable charm, though his looks were hard to ignore, but because he gave me something deeper, a sense of purpose in the classroom. His lessons were more than just academic exercises. They felt like a challenge to grow, to aim higher. His classroom became my sanctuary, a place where my efforts felt meaningful, and where I was inspired to push myself. I never missed a class and always gave it my all. Unlike some of my classmates who bantered and joked with him, vying openly for his attention, I admired him quietly. I wasn't bold enough to engage him the way they did. Instead, I stayed in my corner, observing and learning, content to let my admiration fuel my determination. For me, it wasn't about standing out for his attention. It was about how he motivated me to be better. And yet, I couldn't ignore a subtle longing within me, a desire to be noticed even just once. I wondered if, amidst his efforts to make us all feel seen, he might see me differently. Perhaps it was his teaching style, his ability to make each student feel valued, but I couldn't help hoping there was something more. In every class, I sat quietly, fully absorbed in his words. I wanted to learn, of course, but I also wanted to impress him. Every question he posed felt like an opportunity to show him I was serious about my education, to prove that I was someone worth remembering. Occasionally, I'd wear my favorite dress to his class, not because it was extravagant but because it made me feel confident. It was simple yet special, and I'd sit at my desk hoping he might notice the effort I'd made. Whenever he called on me, my heart would pound as though I were about to step onto a stage. Nervous energy coursed through me, but I always managed to answer. I wanted him to see I wasn't just another face in the crowd. And when he smiled, meeting my gaze, and said, "Good job, Emma," it felt like a triumph. In those moments, it seemed like the world had shrunk to just the two of us, and I held on to that feeling for the rest of the day. As the school year unfolded, Mr. Scott became more than a teacher in my eyes. He became a presence that lingered in my thoughts and dreams. I'd imagine his kind smile and the way he carried himself with effortless grace. It wasn't just his appearance that captivated me, but the way he made everyone around him feel important. That, more than anything, made him unforgettable. Then one day something happened that both thrilled and unsettled me. I found out where he lived. His house was just a short walk from mine, nestled on a quiet street in the neighborhood. Knowing that felt like holding on to a secret I couldn't let go of. After school, I'd sometimes take a longer route home just to pass by his house, glancing at the windows in the hope of catching a glimpse of him. Occasionally I did. I'd see him outside, watering his plants or unloading groceries from his car. When he noticed me, he'd smile and wave, and my heart would race. Those moments, however fleeting, felt like tiny treasures. But there were also times when I'd see him with friends, laughing and talking with ease. In those moments, an unfamiliar pang of jealousy crept in, leaving me with a heavy ache I didn't entirely understand. Just as I had convinced myself that Mr. Scott would always be a part of my world, everything shifted. At the start of grade 11, he shared news that sent a shockwave through the class. He had accepted a new job in another city and would be leaving the school. In an instant, the person who had become a cornerstone of my life was about to disappear. The announcement hit me harder than I could have imagined. I hadn't realized how much his presence had come to mean to me. His encouraging words, his engaging lessons, and the quiet comfort of knowing he was there each day. With his departure, the school felt different. It was quieter, emptier, as though some vital spark had been extinguished. I still remember his last day. The classroom had an unusual stillness, the typical chatter replaced by a somber mood. He thanked us for being such a wonderful class, but his words felt distant, almost muted. I sat silently, trying to hold back the emotions welling up inside me. As he walked out of the classroom for the last time, it felt like the end of something irreplaceable. In the days that followed, his absence was everywhere. The school seemed less vibrant and lessons felt flat without his energy. I often caught myself instinctively looking for him, only to be reminded he was no longer there. It wasn't just his teaching I missed how he had made me feel. Seen, inspired, and capable of more than I had thought possible. Though I never told him how much he had meant to me, a part of me hoped he knew. Even now, when I look back on that year, I realize his impact was profound. Mr. Scott didn't just teach me English. He taught me about believing in myself, embracing challenges, and accepting that change, no matter how bittersweet, is a part of life. He left, but the lessons he imparted stayed with me, shaping the person I've become. For weeks, I carried the weight of his absence like a hollow ache in my chest. Each day felt incomplete, as though an essential piece of my world had vanished. Unable to let go, I found myself taking long, deliberate detours past his house, hoping against hope to catch one final glimpse of him. But the house was lifeless, its silence a stark reminder that he was truly gone. I threw myself into preparations for my university exams, trying to drown the pain in late-night study sessions and stacks of textbooks. Yet no matter how hard I tried, his shadow lingered in every corner of my mind. Every page I turned, every word I read, seemed to echo his voice, and the ache of missing him never faded. Months later, determined to channel my emotions into something productive, I signed up for extra English classes. Felt like a step toward a fresh start, a way to move forward. But life, as it often does, had its own plans. On the first day, I walked into the classroom and froze. There he was, Mr. Scott, standing at the front of the room. My heart leapt, a wave of disbelief and joy washing over me. He looked a little older, his features touched by a quiet maturity, but his warm, familiar smile was just as I remembered. When his eyes met mine, they lit up with recognition. "Welcome back, Emma," he said, his voice as steady and reassuring as ever. It felt as though the universe had granted me an unexpected second chance, a gift I vowed not to take for granted. For the next 6 months, I poured everything I had into those classes. Each lesson became an opportunity to prove how much I had grown, to show him I was no longer the timid girl from high school. I studied harder than ever, driven by a determination to make him proud. Slowly but surely, I earned my place as one of his top students, a fact he acknowledged with quiet, heartfelt praise that filled me with pride. After class, he often lingered for casual conversations. At first, we talked about my studies or my plans for university, but as time passed, our discussions deepened. He became more than just a teacher. He became a mentor, someone I trusted with my hopes, fears, and dreams. His patience and understanding made me feel seen in a way few ever had. One day, out of the blue, he offered to walk me home. The question caught me off guard, and I barely managed to contain the excitement surging within me. "Really?" I asked, trying to sound calm. He smiled, and that simple gesture was all the reassurance I needed. From then on, those walks became a treasured part of my routine. Each evening felt like stepping into a world that belonged to just the two of us. We talked about everything: our ambitions, life's twists and turns, and the moments that shaped who we were. With each shared conversation, the bond between us grew stronger, weaving a connection that made the streets seem brighter and the air feel lighter. For the first time in a long while, The ache in my heart began to fade, replaced by a quiet, hopeful warmth. As time passed, our bond deepened and grew into something far beyond teacher and student. We started meeting outside the classroom, stealing moments in the park where conversations flowed endlessly about everything and nothing. On other days, we'd watch movies together, sharing quiet laughter and the kind of unspoken connection that made each moment feel magical, like it was straight out of a love story. Then came the day that changed everything, our first kiss. It happened so naturally, so seamlessly, that it felt destined, as if the universe had been orchestrating it all along. His touch was tender, his kiss soft and sweet, and for a fleeting moment the rest of the world faded away. In his arms, I felt like the luckiest person alive, as though all my dreams had suddenly converged into reality. But life, unpredictable as always, had other plans in store. One afternoon, as we sat together discussing the future, he shared news that shattered the fragile happiness we had built. He had been offered an extraordinary job opportunity in the United States. It was a chance of a lifetime, one he couldn't afford to pass up. His words felt like a hammer blow. My heart sank as I grappled with the reality of his impending departure. He wasn't just leaving the city, he was leaving me, leaving us. I wanted to ask him to stay, to plead with him not to go, but the words got stuck in my throat, too weak to convey the whirlwind of emotions inside me. We made promises to stay connected, to hold on to what we had despite the distance. For a while we did. His letters became my lifeline, each one brimming with warmth, humor, and stories from his new life. I read them obsessively, treasuring every word as though it were a piece of him I could hold. We exchanged emails and shared late-night phone calls, each one a fragile thread tying us together across the miles. At first, it felt like we could beat the odds, that our connection was strong enough to endure the separation. But as time wore on, life began to intervene. I started college, immersing myself in a world of classes, new friendships, and unfamiliar experiences. Gradually, inevitably, the letters grew less frequent, the emails shorter. Phone calls became rare until one day they stopped altogether. Weeks turned into months and months into years. We drifted apart, not because of anger or intention, but simply because life carried us in different directions. What we had was beautiful and real, but in the end, it became a memory, a bittersweet reminder of love found and lost, and the unpredictability of life's journey. 8 years had passed, 8 years of growth, change, and memories settling quietly in the corners of my mind. Life had moved on, and so had I. But one ordinary evening, while scrolling through social media, my heart skipped a beat. There he was, Mr. Scott. His profile picture stared back at me, older but still familiar. The rush of emotions was immediate, stirring up feelings I thought I'd left behind. Without thinking, I sent him a message. My fingers trembled as I typed, unsure if he would remember me or even reply. But to my surprise, he did. We made plans to meet at a cafe, and the days leading up to it were a whirlwind of anticipation. I spent hours wondering what to wear, wanting to look my best, but also wondering if I'd even recognize the man who had once meant so much to me. When the day arrived and I saw him across the cafe, my breath caught. He had changed. Time had left its mark. He was older, carrying a little more weight, with streaks of gray weaving through his dark hair. His kind eyes, once so full of light, now carried a quiet depth, touched by years of life's experiences. It was still him, but he was undeniably different. We talked for hours, catching up on the years we'd missed. His stories were rich with the kind of wisdom that only age can bring, and I listened intently. But there was something in the way we spoke that made me realize the connection we once had faded. The spark that had once felt so alive was now just a soft, distant glow. I didn't feel sadness, just acceptance. We had both changed, grown, and the people we had become no longer fit together as we once had. In the days that followed, I found myself reflecting on that meeting. The truth settled into my heart like a bittersweet truth. The man I had once adored no longer held that place in my heart. He wasn't the figure I had idolized in my youth, and I wasn't the girl who had looked up to him with such longing. But that was okay. Life had moved on, and so had I. The love I once felt was real, but it belonged to another version of me. As I sifted through old photos of school, I felt a sense of deep gratitude. Those days had been filled with the intensity of first loves, the kind of magic that comes only once. But like all things, those moments were meant to pass. Life had brought me new lessons, new experiences, and new reasons to grow. I realized that letting go wasn't a loss. It was an invitation to embrace what was ahead. Walking away from the cafe that day, I felt lighter. A weight I hadn't even realized I was carrying seemed to lift from my heart. Mr. Scott would always be a cherished part of my past, a chapter in the story of who I was. But now it was time to start writing my own story. One that was entirely mine, filled with new adventures, new loves, and dreams yet to be realized. As I stepped into the sunlight, a smile spread across my face. The past was part of me, but it no longer defined me. I was ready to move forward, to turn the page and see what the next chapter would bring.